For me, one thing I learned about violence working with the violence reduction unit is that, violence is, they often say, two components: a lack of empathy followed up by social triggers, right? And, I often get asked about testosterone, is that causing violence? And that, testosterone's a bit like a zombie. It just never goes away. The conversation just never, it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. I don't believe in that. I think the way we're socialized, the way we're nurtured can affect our biology. We know that from early years trauma. We know that if we're living in violent networks, support networks, family networks, that can impact our neural pathways and can lead to lack of empathy. So that is clear. And also recent research suggests that we know that young girls mature earlier than boys. So we know that young men are living in toxic, stressful situations with longer because the brain is more susceptible and weaker, and that can have an impact. I really believe the way the way that we are socializing our boys. It's almost like it's in the air we breathe. We hear that phrase, toxic masculinity. I'm not a fan of the phrase. Why? Because I think it turns people off, especially men off. It's an academic phrase. I understand it. And I often use a phrase used by my friend, Don McPherson, who's an ex-pro US footballer. And he wrote a lovely book called You Throw Like a Girl. And he uses the phrase, the mandates of masculinity, the expectations placed on you by your peers, by your families, by your communities, society, or whatever. So I think really, we need to look at the way that we're bringing up our boys and our men in these environments where violence is far too often the default. If you look at young men in prison, and I think 95% of our prison population are boys and men. Again, why is that? Why is that so high within boys and men? If you look at, I'm quite sure a lot of the men in prison, if you look at their biography, since they were like 1, 4, or 5, and their life biography, violence will be part of that. Witnessing it in the home, being exposed to it in the community, experiencing it at the hands of their parents, in their community, wherever. So violence is peppered, and I think that's throughout their whole life cycle. And is it any wonder we see that outcome at the end? And I think going back to what you talked about, Gregor, about the justice system, I do believe in punishment, because I think it's important that victims, we have swift, visible justice. But punishment should be a punishment, but also rehabilitation, right? I remember going to a talk many years ago, Terry Waite, who was the minister who was kidnapped in Beirut all those years ago. And he talked about that. Punishment is punishment in the UK and around the world. We don't focus enough on rehabilitation. We still have people going to prison because it's the safest place for them. That just shocks me. It disgusts me that that's the safe place for a person is back in prison. So I really believe, I'd love people to be sentenced to jobs. You will be given a job as part of your punishment. How do we give hope to the hopeless? The people who just lack that sense that things are going to get better out there. I'm a great believer in second chances, third chances, even fourth chances. But accountability is really, really important. We need people to be holding themselves accountable, and victims need to be, they need to have justice. Society needs to have that. But I'd like to see more community-based interventions than prison. Prison is there for the few, not for the many. We seem to have lost that. Prison doesn't work for me. And the criminal justice system was designed to solve issues. It creates many more problems than it's designed to solve. Homelessness, addictions, families being split up, no employment. Yeah, major issues. And that just ripples out into families, into communities as well.